Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us a final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. Then it's time to turn your pods up, because we're live to tape from the mountains of West Virginia. It's time once again for Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
Live to tape from the mountains of West Virginia, it's another episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, Dimension Devices is one of the leading companies with the sole mission to redefine the paranormal investigation experience. They are the creators of their flagship product, the Chattergheist Touch. We'll be learning more about this device and how it works, all this plus more. But before we bring in our guest, I'm happy to have a great friend of mine and a friend of the show. He's a man of many talents as a paranormal investigator, debunker, with a very successful TikTok and YouTube channel. Please welcome back our good friend and special guest host, Nate Elwell. Nate, my friend, thank you for coming back and agreeing to be a part of this episode.
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. I mean, I'm humbled by the invitation to come here and co-host for you.
Bro, when I learned that I was going to have the founder of Dimension Devices, I can't think of a better person to have on the show because you have a lot of experience using different type of devices, and sometimes you actually you make the videos with your reviews about them as well. So before we get into that, since our last episode when you were on, what have you been up to? I know you've been doing a lot of rounds with the podcasts. You just did a Paracon not long ago. So how did that all go?
Oh, it went great. We went down to Salem, Massachusetts, and we did the Salem Paranormal and Horror Convention. Me and my good friend Adam Began, we shared the stage together. It was kind of like a full circle thing for us. So I was actually the co-host for Adam's first ever podcast. And then he had me on for his first podcast when he started his, and then we spoke together at Salem. So it's kind of like a full circle event there. It was really cool. I got some great new devices to test out. I got a REM pod. I got some other stuff that I wanted to check out. As far as what I've been up to, just doing my thing, TikTok, and I've got 15 podcasts lined up right now. I've got 2 conventions next year I've been invited to. So things are working, man. Things are going busy.
Great. And and I know before the pre-show, you and I we were talking about how different things have been with us since you were first on my other show, and then you were also one of the first guests on the new brand. How things have changed, man. By the wall on your back.
Yes, I don't know if I can get a good
the
shot.
Listeners can't see. Yeah, they can't see it, but I can see it. You're running out of real estate, man. You're gonna have to go somewhere else, get a bigger studio.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do something. You know what? I might just transfer up and start filming in the attic again. I don't like doing that though, because the connection up there is not that great, and during the winter, being up there sucks.
I think being in the attic altogether sucks. Just talk to
one of my favorite rooms in the house.
You seen that? You seen that movie? Oh yeah, okay. Just remember that movie, that scene in Psycho, Norman Bates in the attic thing. So that's a whole different thing. So now, my friend, happy to have you on. Like I said, I couldn't think of any other person to have on the show but you. So let's please welcome to Let's Find Out a new friend of the show, the person behind Dimension Devices, Barry, my friend. Thank you for being very patient, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Awesome to be here. Glad to be a guest. Glad to meet Nathaniel. Glad to meet Diego. Glad to be here. It's awesome.
Yes, nice to meet you as well. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So
yeah, totally. Me too.
Barry, I was going through your site. We're talking about the Chattergeist Touch, but before we get into that, behind the science and technology behind this device, before that, were you using anything different? It looks like perhaps some of these devices disappointed you or other paranormal investigators, where it's time to make something that actually works better.
Yeah, so it was kind of a just to give you a bit of background, it's kind of a bit of a convoluted story. So I've always been interested in paranormal, like my entire life, pretty much, starting with these horrible, cheap books and magazines and going through to the X-Files. And the X-Files spurned the opening of conspiracies and UFOs and ghosts. And that was all, just all encompassing, and absolutely loved it. So then I kind of moving forward, I kind of lost interest, not lost interest, but I kind of, my life got in the way. My career took charge, and I started going down the route of doing other things. And I started working for a prominent programming and marketing company. That was like 25 years ago, and just started programming. And only about 2.5 years ago, I spoke to Travis Wisotsky. Do you know Travis Wisotsky, also known as Net Echo? He does his own paranormal investigations.
Not sure who that is.
I'm
Oh,
sorry,
he's great. You
don't
should definitely.
know.
Oh yeah, you should definitely check him out. He's on YouTube, Net Echo. His paranormal investigations very down to earth, and not embellished, not sensationalized. He does good stuff,
Yeah,
mainly around the Iowa area.
like that.
Sorry.
Oh, I said I'll check him out for sure. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely do it. He's a smart chap. He's on the ball. He makes his own devices as well. He makes REM pods out of cigarette packets and stuff like that. He's a really cool guy. So yeah, I started speaking to him because I was playing a computer game called Project Zomboid, which I love, and I thought, well, wonder whether anyone else streams this, and I can go and have a look at them playing it. And found his channel and started to talk to him. Joined his Discord, chatted away, and it turns out that he was doing paranormal investigations. And I was like, oh wait, I've got an interest in that. Let's talk about that for a bit. And he put me onto this device called the Ovilus, which I had never heard of at the time. And I looked it up. And coming from a programming and electronics background, looking at it very critically, very sort of suspiciously, I guess you would say. And it was selling for $600 or something silly. And it,
Oh yeah,
Wow.
they're expensive.
yeah, it was absolutely insane. And my immediate thought was, man, I could make this better. I could make this cheaper, and I could make this more affordable for like the paranormal community. And that's basically where the Chattergeist comes from. And unfortunately, the listeners won't be able to see, but I've actually got the first version of it here. This is the first version of Chattergeist, which is an absolute state on a breadboard, an old Nokia screen and a bunch of sensors all wired up on a breadboard. And that measured like humidity and temperature, aggregated that, and give you words based upon the sensor readings. And over the course of about 2 years or so, we've kind of refined that, and we've got that down to this tiny little 1.2-inch circle, which is basically the same form factor as a smartwatch, touch screen, and it measures electromagnetic fields, temperature, and radio frequency noise, and does the exact same thing as the Ovilus and more. We're quite proud of the fact that I think it's currently 8 times the functionality, 8 times the functionality of the Ovilus for like 1/5 of the price. And
Yeah,
we're so proud of that fact.
So I will say, I did notice that on your website, when you actually go and click on the products and you go to click on the Chattergeist, it brings up a chart. And you basically went through and you broke down what it does as compared to what the other devices do. So my curiosity here is, how long did it take you to compile that list?
Oh man, it's ever growing. Let's just put it that way. It took ages initially, and we did ruffle a hell of a lot of feathers. We've got a lot of hate from other device creators, specifically the ones that we've compared our device with. They don't like the fact that we're calling them out for saying your device is twice as expensive and does like half the stuff that we do.
Well, I can tell you from someone who does TikTok and breakdowns and debunking, I'm prone to ruffling feathers myself, so I respect that.
Yeah, it's a funny community, the paranormal community. Luckily, we've gotten on the good side, and we've got a lot of support, and we've got a lot of people following us, and a lot of like welcoming arms into the paranormal community, para unity, as people like to say. But on the flip side of that, it can be very fickle. You can get a lot of hatred. You can get a lot of infighting. Just the mention of demon can make people absolutely hate you, and I'm sure we've all seen that first-hand experience.
Oh yeah.
It's been a good journey. It's been an interesting journey, and I'm definitely looking forward to the future and what it's going to bring. We've got amazing plans coming up for the next year or so.
Oh, I have a cat.
Barry, if you don't mind me, I have a cat too. If you don't mind me asking, Barry, so when you showed the original version of that device, it was pretty sizable. How did you manage to take all those components and shrink it down to about a quarter of that size or smaller and still have the same functionality?
Yeah, so it doesn't quite have the same functionality. So this has buttons instead of a touchscreen. The initial version had buttons instead of a touchscreen. It had a mercury switch instead of an accelerometer to detect movement. And it's also got a speaker, which the Chattergeist does not have a speaker. It's completely silent. But we'll probably go into that a bit later on, so I've got plans for that. But it also measures different it also has different sensors to what the current version of Chattergeist has. So this has humidity and a very in-depth temperature and luminosity sensor that kind of redundant. So what we've actually done is using in the new boards, we've actually got an onboard temperature chip, which is much more basic, but it does everything that a user will require it to do. And humidity was so fickle, like if you breathed on it with hot breath, you could change it, and that just seemed kind of redundant. You could get a lot of false positives on your readings with that. So we've removed that completely. And basically, what it all boils down to was finding the right board for a good price, but which was also extensible. And this was huge for us because I didn't want to just create one device. People buy it, use it, and that's the end of it. I wanted to have a little port on it so people could plug other things into it and gradually extend it over time. So we've got some extensions in the works. And the Chattergeist Touch has a 4-pin port, so we can actually plug different extensions into it, or mods, if you want to call them mods, into it. And we got the first one of those in development at the moment, called the Chattergeist Probe. So yeah, it's the how is basically a good year of searching for the right components and contacting suppliers and manufacturers and working out deals and making sure we can get it cheap enough to manufacture it to the point where it's affordable for the average Joe paranormal investigator to get hold of without breaking the bank, which was difficult, but we got there.
So I heard you mention that it had the original had a luminosity tester. So you said that you removed that function, correct?
Yeah, exactly. The original plan was to have one on there, but the problem with that is something as simple as moving your hand over the device and causing a shadow could cause a false positive, or something as simple as it reconfiguring like an average reading for the area in which you're scanning could also trigger a false positive.
I've only seen one other device that I can think of, and it was so long ago I can't even remember the name of it, that had a luminosity detector. And realistically, I feel like it's a great tool to have if you know how to properly utilize it. Like if you're using it as a stationary device, in the theory that spirits or ghosts emit their own light and you detect a change in luminosity, then there is a plausibility that could be a useful feature, but you are 100% right. It could definitely lead to false positives.
Yeah, exactly. One thing actually, this is sort of in the background, we're sort of looking at this general idea, but we're actually attempting to, and this is very sort of early days, but we're attempting to create a shadow detector. So you have luminosity detectors that detect light on various levels and give you an output. But there's nothing as such that I've found called a shadow detector, which would take the average base reading of the area. And if something darker appears in a specific area, it will then actually output what that is and where that is and give you an output for that. But this is sort of a loose idea that was sort of thrown around, kicking around the team at the moment. And we're a very small team. So
with all the tools that you listed in there, I know there's a theory about changes in barometric pressure. Have you ever thought about putting a barometer into one of these devices?
Yeah, so actually initially the Chattergeist, I call the first version Chattergeist version 0.1 because that's what it is in my mind. It actually had the humidity and barometer built in the same sensor. We did use that for a little bit, but unfortunately due to the bulkiness of the sensor, like I can show you here if I unplug it from the board, that's the general size of it. I mean, obviously listeners can't see it, but that's compared to the Chattergeist itself, it's pretty sizable. So fitting it into a smartwatch, and that was another thing that was very important to us, is having it as a smartwatch form factor, because it's ultra portable, it's ultra light, and we've got a wrist mount in the works as well with a battery pack, so you'd actually be able to wear it like a smartwatch when you're on investigations out on the field. So having anything too bulky was kind of a no-no. However, that being said, with the 4-pin extension port, doesn't mean it won't happen in the future. It might very well release something of that type that people can just plug in and use.
Yeah, and myself as an investigator, I've been investigating the paranormal and researching for 16 years. And, the size of the equipment, like if it's too bulky, we don't want to use it because it's too difficult to transport, it's too difficult to pull out. And it's got to be simplistic too. You can't have something that you have to find the on-off switch and then freaking calibrate everything. It just takes too much time because you know what? You never know when activity is going to happen. So you need something that's easily accessible, that's lightweight, and does the job that you need it to do quickly. So I, for one, can definitely appreciate that.
Exactly. I mean, we spoke to quite a few investigators, and one of the biggest bugbears was having a backpack full of equipment. You just end up going to somewhere and you've got an entire backpack full of batteries, full of cameras, full of cat balls, full of REM pods, full of everything underneath the sun. And everything's a separate device. It made
Yeah.
sense to us to create something that was modular. So if you wanted the base functionality of the Chattergeist, but you also wanted to have a cat ball, you don't necessarily need to bring a cat ball, because we've actually got what we're terming a Weegle, which is a bit like a Weeble wobble.
Okay.
So the idea is to plug the Chattergeist in the top, and it'll show you a graph of the current movement, and it will wobble around just like a cat ball would. If it moves, it'll show you a movement actually on the graph on the top and give you a little flashing light. So
Nice.
we're kind of trying to integrate as many different paranormal devices as we can into the Chattergeist, to kind of alleviate that need of just carrying around so much stuff. It makes so much more sense just to have something small that can do multiple things. And again, that harkens back to efficiency, I guess, more than anything. Efficiency over anything else.
Yeah, that's a great selling point to use that device. But let me ask you this: during the testing process, before you felt comfortable to release it to the general public, let's say, did you send it out to different paranormal investigators? And if you did do that, to make sure you get the 2 thumbs up ready for release, what was their feedback on it, and what did they catch while they were using these devices?
So we only sent out to a couple, and we did a couple of paranormal investigations ourselves, because we're living in England. We've got quite a rich history, as you no doubt know. And that down the road from where I live, there's actually a church that's from the 1200s. So I don't know what that works out as now, 600 odd years, whatever, 620 years old. So we did a couple of experiments there. And then the initial Chattergeist version was just words, and the words weren't dictionary based. They would just pick letters at random and vowels at random based on the sensors, and then spit those out in sequence. And the results were not great. And that's what the Chattergeist version 0.1 does. It just spits out letter. Have you ever heard of the Envoy?
I've not.
Yeah, it's basically like an Ovilus, but instead of doing words and phonetic sounds, it just spits out letters, kind of the way a Ouija board would work. When the planchette goes over a letter, it then signals it. But most of the outputs on that are pretty random, and they're never really that legible in terms of words or anything like that. So it made more sense for us to build a dictionary of words, have those words stored in the Chattergeist, and then sensor readings when the sensors find a reading, which we'll go into a little bit later, I'm sure, about how it does that.
So what is the dictionary size in the Chattergeist?
This was another big bit of contention, because originally the original Chattergeist, which was in the actual smartwatch form factor, only had 2,000 words, and the Ovilus only has 2,048, and we just felt like that wasn't enough. It seemed very geared towards a certain type of answer. Most of the words on the Ovilus are things like graveyard and skulls and death and murder, and that's stuff that people expect to get. And it didn't gel very well with us. You should have a larger dictionary, a larger range of words. So we've managed to fit 17,300 plus on here, which is an incredible amount. But it's still growing as well. We're very, very proud of that. So hopefully in the next year, we'll be able to almost double that, we're hoping. So you're talking somewhere in the range of about 30,000 words.
Nice.
And they're not all related to death and ghosts and spooky stuff. Some of them are just words like grass or tree, which we feel is very, very important. We've also got a list of 10,000 different names, both surnames and forenames, which may not be the most comprehensive list in the world, but it's still the biggest of the devices out there on the market at the moment. And we feel that's important as well, because if a name comes up and it corresponds to the place in which you are, then you can infer meaning from that.
No, absolutely. It gives credibility to the device as far as direct to history confirmation.
Exactly. Well, funnily enough, one of the people who bought one of our devices follows us on Facebook. And she bought a device and she used it once and didn't get any particular output that was relevant at all. The second time she used it, she got her name. And the chances of that are just incredible. it was only, I think there was only 3 words on the output, because Chattergeist can display between 1 and 5 words in dictionary mode. And so that's, I mean, you're basically talking 1 in 17,300 chance of that coming up. But
Yeah,
it's not just that, because it also has to correspond to the sensor reading as well. So it's a just incredible amount of dice rolling to be able to get that by chance.
Yeah, because I know that my friend Bree Hollingshead uses one, and she absolutely swears by it.
Yeah, I mean, I love Bree. Bree's great. I've chatted to Bree quite a bit. We support her to the nth degree. She is absolutely wonderful. Awesome. She's a wonderful person. But yeah, I mean, yeah, she's had some very interesting results in terms of cross-device verification. So using 2 different devices, the Chattergeist and something else, and both of them coming up with similar, if not the same, outputs at the same time. And that's fascinating to me.
Let me ask this, because you brought it up earlier when you were gathering the materials to create the Chattergeist, to where you kept the price affordable for the general public to use. Why is it, do you think, in your opinion, that most other devices are almost double or triple the price? Is it because they weren't, God, I'm going to say this, but it is what it is. Were they not business minded enough to find resources or material at an affordable price? Or is it one of those things that maybe they're trying to take advantage of the market?
Yeah, well, let's call it out as it is. I think a lot of device creators are taking advantage. I've said in multiple interviews, and I think even on our website, there's a quote by me saying it is daylight robbery. And I remember saying to Travis, Net Echo again, when we were first talking about the Ovilus, I think my initial reaction was, holy shit, that is daylight robbery. Because that's incredible. I mean, the average person who wants to do ghost hunting and wants to, do paranormal investigation, and generally afford $600 for one device that just does like 1 or 2 things. And that was absolutely mind-blowing to me. And the Envoy, which only does 2 things, I think it's got an emoji mode that shows like a smiley, happy face or a sad face or a straight face, and the letters coming out randomly. I've seen that go for $800. And it blows my mind that stuff is that expensive. And the actual guy who created the Ovilus, he's retired now, so there won't be an Ovilus version 6. But as he was retiring, he was advertising a more portable one that sat on your wrist, which is ironic because I only found out about that about a month ago. And I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, oh, well, we beat him to the punch. And then I found out he had retired anyway. But I can only imagine what price he would have sold that for. And it's
I don't even want to know.
No, exactly. Is it? Yeah, you're just better off not knowing.
I mean, I have found used Ovilus devices that go for about $400 in fair condition. Like when you can find them on the market, they're extremely expensive, and to be able to find one that's brand new, you're definitely going to pay for it. It's like buying a DR60 voice recorder.
Exactly.
And I don't even trust those. Like to me, the mechanics on the inside create too much noise that could make false positives as far as what you're hearing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good point actually. Going slightly away from Chattergeist, but more into the realm of EVPs. I actually use a Sony dictaphone for EVPs, and I love it because it's got a lossless compression, so you don't get any sort of compression artifacts, sound artifacts. Because sometimes, like if you were to just record water coming out of a tap and you recorded it on some dictaphones, sometimes when you play that back, that can sound like mumbling, groaning, or some
it absolutely can
noises. And you need to be really careful with audio recording devices. There's many out there that have that compression, or even so, there's people out there using it that don't know how to switch that compression off. And I think that's a very important thing to know.
Oh, it absolutely is, and that's something that's very if they take nothing else away from this podcast, that's very important too. Yeah. I swear by my RCA recorder. I have an RCA and I have a Sony. I swear by them. Even if I had a DR60, I would probably never use it.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I guess this is I kind of going back to people shouting demon and getting all the clicks and views and sensationalism. It kind of plays into that a little bit. People want to hear something. People want to get something that makes them go, "Holy crap! What on earth was that?" And those devices give them more means to do that, whereas Chattergeist doesn't, and the lossless compression doesn't. So people don't tend to navigate towards them because they feel like they're not doing the job correctly.
Right.
Where in actual fact, they're actually more genuine in a lot of ways.
So I saw on your website that you guys are working on formulating a Bluetooth app for the Chattergeist.
Yeah. So Chattergeist actually has Bluetooth built in. It actually has Wi-Fi built in, but we've got it completely disabled because the last thing we want is for someone to shout, "Hey, this can connect to the internet." It might just be listening to you and bringing something back. So we've disabled all of that. We're not going to use Wi-Fi ever. But it does have Bluetooth, and it's actually enabled at the moment. And you can use it's Bluetooth low energy, so you have to download a BLE reader app. But all of the BLE reader apps are absolutely diabolical. So we're going down the route of developing our own, and it's in the sort of final testing stages at the moment before we start putting some polish on it, just to make sure that it's working correctly.
Okay. Yeah. Well, like I said, I saw it on the website, so I was curious about that because on my YouTube channel, that's pretty much what I do. Is I test paranormal applications on my YouTube channel. So I try to figure out which ones work, which ones don't, which ones to avoid. And so when I saw you guys had an app coming out, that like instantly perked up my interest.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the app itself won't do anything unless you have the Chattergeist device.
Right.
It has to connect to the device in order to work.
Right.
We've actually... Sorry.
With the device.
You what, sorry?
I said, right. It works in conjunction with the device, not just by itself.
Exactly. And funnily enough, we've actually... one of the first feathers we ruffled, and I'm hesitant to call them out by name, but there was an app, and it's one of the most popular Android and iPhone apps for speaking to ghosts, in air quotes, speaking to ghosts. And I don't think the creators of the Android apps are aware that you can actually decompile these apps and run them through test programs. So we actually actively decompiled a bunch of these apps. And it turns out that a lot of them aren't doing anything at all. And this one specifically I'm talking about, it claims to use barometric pressure, humidity, a magnetometer, the lumens from the sensors, and the accelerometer to select words from a dictionary. But running it through these test programs, what it actually does is nothing. It gets all the readings from all these sensors. It does nothing with the sensor readings at all, and just picks words at random.
That almost sounded like the Ghost Hunter M2 app.
The what app, sorry?
It almost sounded like the Ghost Hunter M2 app that has a lot of those tools in it.
Yeah, it's not that one, but we have tested that one as well. Let's just leave it at that.
Yep.
Don't get me in trouble.
I don't want to ruffle any feathers. Really.
Nope.
Exactly. So we can talk about it off stream if you want to.
I'm good with that.
But yeah, I've actually recorded some video of these apps in testing as quote unquote evidence, but I've not released them, and I don't plan on releasing them. I just don't want any sort of anger geared towards me or geared towards other creators. But I think every single phone app should be taken with a grain of salt, based on what I've found out from decompiling the apps. And I recommend all of your listeners download Android Studio, get hold of the APK files for your favorite spirit communication app, and decompile it and play with it and learn it and find out exactly what it's doing before you start listening to it.
Good advice.
Yeah, it's easier said than done, but if you've got the time to do it, definitely do it.
Now, with the continual popularity of paranormal hunting, investigating, and research, have you caught any one of these popular shows, and you don't have to name the shows of the person, to where they might be using some devices and you're like oh crap, please tell me you're not using that, and actually made on TV like something positive, got a positive hit? Have you noticed that now?
Yeah, so not necessarily TV. I mean, I could definitely name a couple that use apps like phone apps on their like sort of broadcast channels that it kind of makes me cringe inside a little bit. But the main ones that make me cringe are the YouTube channels, the YouTubes and TikToks and Instagrams that rely upon these apps. And there's a few, and again, this kind of goes hand in hand with sensationalism and shouting demons. These are the same people that do that as well, which is such a shame. It's kind of what we should be working towards, and we've actually got a page on the website about our ethos and like care in the community. Is what we should be working towards is answers. We shouldn't be working towards sensationalism and clicks, but unfortunately answers don't pay. Sensationalism and clicks pay. Sorry,
go ahead.
Wait, I mean, I get it to a certain extent. I mean, you have to you have to appreciate the hustle at the end of the day. And I do appreciate the hustle, but what I don't appreciate is essentially lying to the people, to your viewers, in order for them to share it and click on it.
I agree with what he's saying 100%. And I can tell you, I've went to locations where I've been there for 12 hours and not had anything happen. And no one wants to pay to watch that on TV. And
Yeah.
actually, several years ago, I was actually interviewed for a ghost hunting show. I'm not going to mention the show's name here. But during the interview, one of the questions they asked me was, would I be willing to sensationalize my experiences for TV? And I told them, if that's what this is about, then I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, we've actually been approached by a couple of TV shows. Nothing is like come of them as of yet, but we have actually turned a couple of them away, purely because, not because they've outright said, "Hey, would you sensationalize?" But based on their previous content, that's definitely what they're doing, and it's just something that we want no part of. To be honest, we're after answers at the end of the day. We want to know what spirits are. Do they exist, what they're doing, and whether we can continually communicate with them on a stable basis. That's what we're.
I mean, I think we're all three on the same mission. We're just trying to find answers to the questions of what's going on out there. Let's find out, which is the purpose of the show. So let me ask you, what is the battery life for the device itself?
Yeah, so the Chattergeist at the moment has no battery. It's a USB powered device. So I've actually plugged it into this little USB. Again, your viewers can't see it, but it's a tiny little pen size, like a vape size USB battery. And I power it off of that. On the back of the device, it does actually have two little pins, which you can plug a lithium ion rechargeable battery into. And that's going to go hand in hand with our wrist pack, which I've got a prototype to my left. But basically, you'll be able to snap it into the wrist pack, and the battery inside the wrist pack will charge it. And power it, and then you can just plug in the USB to charge that battery on the wrist pack. And at the moment, we're looking at, I don't know how technical your knowledge is, so forgive me if I'm getting too basic, but we're kind of talking a 2000 milliamp battery, which is sort of maybe twice the battery that's in a smartwatch, give or take. You're talking somewhere in the realms of about 16 hours usage. Which is more than enough for the average investigation. If you're taking longer than 16 hours for an investigation, that's hardcore.
Yeah. So I know you guys are out of the UK, right?
Yeah.
So my curiosity here would be, let's say someone from the US goes and they want to order one of these Chattergeist devices. Do they have to know the currency exchange rate, or is that going to be factored in automatically on the website?
So it was originally automatically factored. Well, it's the same price whether you buy it in Iraq, Japan, the UK, Canada, US. It's always going to be the same price. The only thing we don't have at the moment is an automatic currency exchange, so you can actually see that on the website.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but I mean, the actual price itself is going to be the same. The only difference is obviously shipping. We ship for free in the UK because we are in the UK, but we have to charge a flat rate internationally. So whether we've sent some to Iceland, we sent one to the edge of Iran, one to Australia, and it's always going to be the same international shipping rate. We're never going to fluctuate depending on where you are. Because that's the worst thing when you, I'll get this device. It's like only like $10 or whatever, and then you go look at shipping. It's like $200 shipping. That's the last thing you want.
Yeah. So with this device, the Chattergeist, if a team goes in, does an investigation, can they have more than one of those devices on hand? Will it interfere with the other one? So let's say if the paranormal team of 5 or 4, is it recommended to just have one or multiple? Will multiple really mess with the results of the device?
No, not really. I mean, the actual environmental sensors barely go out within 1 centimeter of the device. So if you've got multiple devices, as long as they're far apart, they're not going to interfere with each other at all. We've had 2 people so far that have owned 2 devices and 3 devices, and they've taken them on investigations, and the devices occasionally correspond with each other. They occasionally come up with the same things, but not all the time. And this is so I consider myself a healthy skeptic. One of the things I say in all of these sort of interviews and podcasts is growing up on the X-Files, I always thought of myself as a bit of a Mulder. I was always a bit of a Fox Mulder. I was ready to believe. I believed it all. Aliens, UFOs, ghosts, government conspiracies. I believed it all. But as I've got older, I become more of a Dana Scully. I'm more of like, not a staunch skeptic, but I'm looking for reasoning behind what I'm seeing. So to me, it's good that the device doesn't always correlate. If you had five Chattergeist devices all in the same place and they all correlated all the time, I'd win a Nobel Prize. We'd be infinitely famous because we're communicating with ghosts. So it makes sense to me that they're not, because it's not an exact science. And being a bit of a healthy skeptic, it's good to have that sort of breakdown where you can say, okay, that doesn't correspond. So therefore, I can just say that maybe it's not reading it correctly, or maybe there's nothing in this location worthy of investigation. And of course, I have my own theories on what ghosts actually are. I don't necessarily believe they're dead people. I have sort of loose theories that they're sort of echoes in time, because all time exists all the time, in my opinion. Time is just a figment of your imagination. So who's not to say that right now that someone in the 1700s is talking at exactly the same time you are? Maybe that's what ghost communication is. So it's an interesting thing. But yeah, it's a weird one.
It's not necessarily weird. You're going off of the linear time theory, where all time exists at the same time at any point in time. So realistically, what you might be experiencing isn't necessarily a ghost, but a figment from another time frame that's existing within your period of time, I guess you could say.
Exactly. And actually, going back to the first extension we're creating for this, called the Chattergeist probe, basically it's going to plug into the little 4-pin slot. It's going to have 2 metal prongs sticking out. And the idea is, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Masaru Emoto.
No.
Is it the gentleman with the white hair?
I don't believe so. I think he's got brown hair. If he's still alive. I don't even know if he's still alive, to be honest.
Wow,
but the general theory is that...
No, go ahead.
yeah, me and you both, because he's a very interesting chap. The general theory is that water holds memory. And he's done a lot of experiments. There's one very famous one called the rice experiment, where you can make a whole pot of rice, and you can do this at home. This works at home. This I find fascinating. I've tried it, and it does work, and it's bizarre. You boil a pot of rice. You get 3 containers. Pour the same amount of rice in each of the containers. You label one of them love. You label one of them hate, and the other one you leave unlabeled. And then in the morning and in the evening, you go up to the rice and you say to the love rice, I love you, you taste lovely, I cannot wait to eat you, you're beautiful, you're great. So the rice that doesn't have a label, you ignore it and walk past it. And the rice that has the hate label, you just spout hate at it. You throw profanities at it, you swear at it, you call it all sorts of names under the sun. And over time, you'll notice that the rice which you've spouted hate to is molding faster than the rice that you spouted love to. And the theory is that water, which is in the rice, is holding memory and intent. So your intent towards the rice is being held in that water. And the Chattergeist probe, the idea is, because everything has water in it, mortar has water, red brick has water in it. And if some of these buildings you're investigating have been from like 300 years ago, intent from human consciousness could be held within the water within that building. So the idea is to push the device up against the wall, and it will take a base reading from that physical entity which you've touched it against, and use that as the base reading for its sensor outputs on the device, essentially using possible historical intent as a baseline for the outputs on the device. And I think we're the first device to try this, and we've been trialing it, and it's interesting. We've not quite got all like the quirks worked out, but that's the general idea.
Yeah, so if that works at all, like you're describing that it should, it almost sounds like you're physically attempting to be able to physically test the stone tape theory.
The stone tape theory, what's that?
Where any object withholds stuff that you're projecting, similar to what you were saying.
Yeah, so, exactly that, yeah.
It repeats based off of the intention put into the universe or the objects that you're at. You know, it's like, say, you're in an asylum, right? You're more likely to hear the scream of a crazy person in an asylum than what you would hear if you're investigating a residential house. Exactly. So the theory is that, so similar to what you were saying, The stone tape theory is the imprintation of emotions into a surrounding area.
Exactly that, except for with water. It's the exact same thing. And have you ever been to a place, you've walked into a place and you feel comfortable in a place, or you walk into a place and you feel like, oh shit, I've got to get out of here. This is awful. This feels really, really wrong. To me, that states that the water in the surrounding area and the physical area has an intent, an echo of the past. And that if someone was murdered there, maybe you get a shivery feeling, hairs stand up on the back of your neck. That could very well be that.
Yeah,
it could very well be water memory.
It's like when you walk into a room after someone just had an intense argument, you can feel it.
Yeah, exactly. You can cut the atmosphere with a knife. And it's kind of like a historical, if you want to call them spirits, a spiritual version of that. That's my theory. So yeah, we're creating the Chattergeist probe in an effort to kind of get some sort of environmental sensor data reading onto the Chattergeist, and then use that as a baseline for all other outputs that the device does.
Extremely interesting.
Yeah, it's something that I came up with just, like all the good ideas come to you in the shower and the bath. I was just hanging around, and I was like, oh man, this is such a good idea, because I've heard of Masaru Emoto before, and I was like, man, we could produce this so cheaply. So I mean, the actual gubbins of the device, if you want to call it that, super simple. It's just a couple of wires that are just basically attached to the device, and then the device software does everything else you need it to do. So creating the actual Chattergeist probe is going to be super easy, and it's going to just be really, really small. We're talking like 2.5 centimeters. You plug it into the device, get the reading, and then you don't even need to leave it plugged in. Take it out, you've got the reading, it's stored on the device. All other outputs on the device will be based upon that reading.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's an interesting concept, and we're sort of in the sort of trialing stages of that. We've done a couple of little prototypes, but nothing too concrete yet. But we've announced it, and it's definitely going to happen. So it's something that's going to come next year, hopefully.
Awesome.
That's amazing. So, Barry, as we talking about the Chattergeist, and for those who are very interested in knowing more about the device or actually purchasing it, where can they find out more about it?
Yeah, sure. Dimensiondevices.co.uk. It has all the information on the device you need. We're a UK company, but we ship everywhere, with the exception of war-torn countries for obvious reasons, and getting post to those countries is an absolute nightmare. And we're also on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or X as they now call it. Underneath Dimension Devices, you'll be able to find us. We're also on YouTube as well, with some examples of how to use the device, and we're making some tutorial videos. So yeah, hit that up and have a look.
Excellent. And Nate, before we go, because we're running up on the clock, what are you doing next? I know you just got done with the Paracon and you have all these podcasts lined up. How's the rest of the year looking like for you?
The rest of the year looks busy, and actually the start of next year looks busy as well. I've already got 4 podcasts booked for January. I've got, I think, 18 current TikTok breakdowns in the works. I've got 6 coming out that I cannot explain. So I'm looking forward to that, because you know me, I surgically dissect these things, and I try to find any logical reasoning for what people are seeing. And I got, like I said, 6 of them that I've got nothing for. I don't know what in the world's going on. So I got that going on. I got invited to go and do an investigation down at Wilson Castle in Vermont. I got invited to do an investigation at the Whitney Murdoch Mansion down in Massachusetts. So I've got a lot going on in the next few months.
Very busy, man, and I really appreciate both of you coming on. Let's find out and taking the time of your very busy schedules to talk about the Chattergeist and talk about your happenings. And thank you very much for coming on. And if you don't mind, Barry, when the next device comes out, if you don't mind hanging out with Nate and I again, and we're going to talk about that one as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to come back here. We've barely skimmed the surface of what I wanted to talk about. So if you'll have me on again, I will chat your listeners' ears off again. More than happy to do that.
Well,
I look forward.
Let's do this.
I think this device is fascinating.
You say you just scratched the surface. You know what? Let's do 5 more minutes. Barry, let's do it, brother.
I mean, basically, way that, like, all the devices like operating modes, basically. So we've got the dictionary mode, the phonetic mode, the Ouija mode, the spirit 8-ball mode, the canvas drawing mode, the emoji mode, and the letter mode. And the canvas drawing mode is one that I think everyone should know about. So the Ovilus has a canvas drawing mode, but it's It draws it line by line, pixel by pixel, and the images tend to be geometric shapes like triangles and squares of varying degrees of dubious quality, whereas ours tend to be blurred shapes, which doesn't sound much different, but the amount of humanoid shapes we get, and this blows my mind because being the lead
Wow.
developer of
Yeah.
the device, we didn't actually code it to do this. But basically, I coded the device, so it takes the raw sensor data, it then picks a color of a pixel, it pops that on the screen. It then uses the sensor data again and detects whether the next pixel should be the same color or different. And it'll then do that all the way throughout the screen until it creates an image. It then blur that image, and that's the output. That's all it does, and it does nothing more than that. But the outputs we've had tend to have a disproportionate amount of humanoid shapes. And these shapes are always black. They're never white, they're never red, they're never green, they're never skin tone. They're always black human shapes. We've dubbed them shadow figures. And people all over the world are getting these on their device. And I don't know why. And that's the most fascinating thing the Chattergeist does for me, is create these humanoid shapes. It blows my mind. No idea why. And at some point, we'll do more rigorous testing and find out why that is. But there's no programmatic reason why it's doing that.
It does now. Is there a mode that where you can actually print these out?
Yeah, so this is something we're looking into because the device is actually so small. It's very limited on memory. The initial idea was to be able to save these images actually on the device so you can go back through them historically. But because of the lack of memory actually on the device, it's just not possible. But we are looking into a way of exporting it again via the Bluetooth app. So if you've got the Bluetooth app on your phone and then an interesting image comes out, you'll be able to retrieve that on your phone and save it actually directly on your phone.
Nice.
That's something we're hoping to do. There's no concrete promises yet, but it's something we're definitely looking into, because if we can work that out, it'd be amazing.
Well, and I'm glad we saved that towards the end of the show. Barry, thank you so much for sharing that very interesting way that the device works. And then I'm looking again. So the website is dimensiondevices.co.uk. I'm going to give it a whirl, my friend. I'm going to place my order, and I'll let you know what exactly is going on, because this house is full of activity, and Nate knows I've been journaling what's been going on here, and I'm looking forward to find out what the device will do. Hopefully it'll give me some better answers as to what's going on here.
Oh, dude, well, we'll be happy to have you in the family, definitely. The more, the merrier. And
I'll definitely be ordering one at some point soon, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can speak after the podcast and we can, have a chat about that. Because I'd definitely like to have both of you in the Chattergeist family. The more the merrier. And that's not just because of profits. Profits aren't interesting to me as much as the results people are getting. And the results people are getting are mind-blowing. So hopefully we can get your two minds blown. That'd be great.
Awesome. Now you're speaking my language, brother. Thank you, Nate, Barry. Thank you for being on Let's Find Out. We're going to bring this up again in 2024, and I'm interested to know what the results will be. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Please check us out on Spotify, Audible, all of our social media pages, YouTube, and we're also on Rumble. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Thank you for listening to Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. We're on Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, and on Anchor. For more information about Let's Find Out with co-host Diego, please visit us on Facebook.com/co-host Diego, on Twitter at co-host_Diego, and on Instagram as co-host Diego. Copyright co-host Diego. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.